What is the Arab League good for anyway? It's of no use.
They've met 20,000 times. They're good for nothing. What do we want with them anyways? Whether they meet or not, it means nothing.
We are Muslim nations. Islam encourages us to be as one, but that's not how Arab nations are.
It's difficult to hope for Arab unity anymore. We disagree over everything. We disagree for the sake of disagreeing.
Welcome back. For more than 6 decades, the Arab League has acted as the forum for Arab deliberations. Most ended with nothing more than declarations, statements, and empty promises. All hopes and calls to turn the Arab League into a true representative of collective Arab will and interest have failed utterly. While leaders spoke of the need for common actions and promised solidarity, they acted unilaterally, and their dependency on foreign powers has culminated in military and economic intervention unprecedented since colonial times. Saeed Farouqi traces how the poor state of Arab relations and the absence of democracy in most countries paved the way for ever greater interference in the Arab world.
In 1934, the prominent Egyptian lawyer Muhammad Ali Alouba toured the Arab world to promote his idea of an international parliament of the Arab people.
My father, working for the Arab interests, did not like the idea of the Arab League. Instead, the people can do better than the governments. And I think he was right.
2 decades later, the groundswell of popular Arab nationalism found its focus in one charismatic leader.
There was a huge amount of enthusiasm in the 50s because of one man, certainly the most important Arab leader of the 20th century, Nasser of Egypt.
But in the Arab world, powerful leaders riding a tide of popular nationalism have repeatedly found themselves on the receiving end of Western interference, manipulation, and aggression. When Britain, France, and Israel attacked Egypt in what became known as the Suez Crisis, it was the same old policy of divide and conquer. Even though they were signatories to the Arab League's Joint Defense Treaty, no other Arab country came to Egypt's aid.
In terms of peacekeeping and conflict resolution, the Arab League is very poor. So although it has the tactics, the framework to do very well, it doesn't. Why? Basically because most Arab countries are still in competition with each other.
By the time Arab countries did manage to coordinate their defenses in the 1967 war with Israel, it was too late. By then, Israel had been receiving high-tech support from the West for 20 years and easily defeated the Soviet-backed Arab armies. 10 years later, Arab regimes tried to end Lebanon's civil war by sending their own coalition of troops.
Very, very rapidly, the Saudi component, the Sudanese component went back to the country, and basically the Syrians remained, and the Syrians could not really be considered in Lebanon as neutral peacekeeper.
The Arab solution was a failure, and the war would last another 8 years. The Arab League's Joint Defense Treaty failed again in 1990 when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The best the Arab League could produce was a resolution condemning the invasion. 8 of 20 states opposed it. Other Arab armies took their orders from the United States and joined the international coalition to dislodge Iraq from Kuwait.
You had a number of attempts to sort of make sub-regional groupings outside the Arab League for certain members of the Arab League together, but they were not, in general, more successful than the League itself.
To have a common Arab front or a common Arab policy with these issues is very difficult. So I think certain states would feel, well, it's better if we go it alone and just try and do things the way that we want to see them done.
But those Arab leaders who chose to go it alone and defy Western powers have paid a heavy price. Condemned as rogue states or members of the so-called axis of evil, they've been isolated, deposed, and bombed. While allying yourself with foreign powers can protect your regime, it often jeopardizes relationships with your neighbors.
Their aim always to divide the Arab world.
All kind of international intervention or Western intervention caused some sort of division and perhaps try to use and to increase the gap or the division between Middle Eastern or Arab countries?
Most of the time there are a hidden agenda for the West because they should have interest. And even if they don't have a hidden agenda, they are going to be accused of having an agenda.
Over half a century of Palestinian suffering and the failure of the Arab world to stop it has exposed the deepest divisions between Arab states. The cracks don't only appear between nations, but also within them. Today, Arab streets are on the boil as citizens demand an end to the dominance of foreign powers. But when autocratic Arab regimes face internal discontent, they panic.
What we see is broadly defined, vague laws being used to penalize dissent, penalize expression, to send people to jail for accusing them of insulting the state or spreading false information.
If you want the Arab idea to flourish again in the political field, you need to strongly wed it to the idea of democracy.
So, more than 60 years after the Arab League first demanded it, can the nations of the Arab world breathe new life into the old ideal of Arab unity?
I think the Arab idea is a very modern idea. It's still a modern idea, and it's still an ambitious idea. And all these military defeats, all this sort of competition with Islamism, all this sort of experiments in false or mistaken forms of unity should not lead us to throw the baby with the bathwater.
Just as we've seen in the report, the Arabs have failed successfully in the region, and in no other place as in Palestine. So, Robert, I ask you, in this Arab-Israeli conflict, where do you think this so-called Arab Peace Initiative is heading, and will the West support it?
No, the West will do what Israel wants, and there's no point in thinking anything else. I think the only basis for any peace remains UN Security Council Resolution 242, and we all know what that means: withdrawal, security for all states in the area, non-admissibility, the acquisition of land. But settlements will continue to be built in Israel, especially under a Netanyahu government. The West will not bring what it needs to the Arab world, which is primarily not democracy, not human rights, though I think the Arabs would like some packages of our human rights off our supermarket shelves. What the Arab world wants is justice, and this we do not intend to give you.
But what about this Arab Peace Initiative that offers Israel complete peace for complete withdrawal from Arab-occupied territories? What we've heard is that there are new voices in the new administration in Washington, Michael, that are supportive of that.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Washington or Obama has the will to do what has to be done. And with Netanyahu coming in the way he is, with this seemingly permanent rift among the Palestinians, with a still powerful Israel lobby, it doesn't look good. I mean, I think there is more of a discussion, and I think there is a shift to some degree in American opinion, an American Jewish opinion, that would like to see,
especially after the war in Gaza?
There's a lot of criticism after Gaza, absolutely. But will Obama have the guts to open the Gaza crossings? Don't just freeze settlements and outposts of outposts, but make a commitment to start drawing back. Don't worry about the security. Is he going to do that? If I had to bet, I think it's unlikely.
He's not alone in this, and there is something called the Quartet, Alan. And the Quartet is, of course, Europe, Russia, the United Nations, and the United States. The Europeans feel betrayed by the so-called peace process. Every time they bankroll an agreement, Israel comes and destroys it. Do you think there is a shift now, or there is a hope that the Europeans can work better with the Americans to fix anything, or simply it's going to get from bad to worse?
I think, unfortunately, it's going to go from bad to worse. The position of Europe in the Quartet was very bad this year. They supported the American and Israeli policy. Look, if we think about Obama policy, and independently of what he thinks personally, what is the price of imposing an Israeli-Palestinian peace? It is a real crisis between United States and Israel. Why will he pay this price? He has, America, not him, good relation with Israel. the relations with the Arab world, I mean, the government, are not bad.
So he's not paying price for his relation with Israel?
Till now, the only price he's paying is the public opinion.
So the Arabs are failing to put pressure on America?
Yeah, completely failure. And when you speak with, before Obama, when I spoke with some American responsible and saying, but look, the Arab street, they told me, so what? People are speaking about the Arab street for 20 years. No consequence.
So why is Russia then wants to sponsor another so-called Annapolis meeting in Moscow?
No, I think Russia wants to come back in the game, and they are frightened by what's happening in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, etc.
Munir, I want to go back to the question of the United States and no one trusting American will to change.
Obama is serious to do a step in the settlement, and it will be against the Palestinians. It will be unjust settlement, and I am going to oppose it strongly, but I am now taking it objectively. What's happening now? America is in need to make such a step. Why? Because if they are going to concentrate against Iran, and they have to press Netanyahu to accept a step, because if he is insisting that Iran is the enemy, secondly, I think that the Israelis now in a very bad shape on a world scale among the world opinion, and they need to do something for, changing the...
Which starts with my first question. They actually are speaking about peace with Syria.
Look, the problem is that we go through this constant self-delusion of false hopes, saying, oh, well, now there's going to be a Likud government, but only Likud can, or it's going to be a very right-wing government, but only they can make concessions. And then we look at Obama, and then we look at Hillary Clinton. And when she was told that 1,000 Palestinians were going to have their homes demolished, she said it was, unhelpful, like she'd spilt some tea on her blouse, yes, instead of going and putting her arms around them and saying, America will protect you.
Obama will try to show that something is moving on the Israeli-Palestinian field, because he needs this against Iran, he needs this for... But like Annapolis, I mean, we have a meeting in Annapolis, and everybody told, and the media, Western media told, we will have a Palestinian state after 1 year.
If I may just take it one step further, it seems from the Obama administration, what we're hearing with the European support, is they want to take the so-called roadmap between Israelis and Palestinians to a regional roadmap, meaning they want to bring the Arabs into the process and normalize relations between the Arab world and Israel before Israel makes any serious withdrawals. You think that is possible?
If that's what they're thinking, they're crazy. Yeah. I mean, that's just not going to happen because you're putting the cart before the horse.
But don't you think now there are Arab countries ready to normalize relations with Israel?
Not under the present circumstances. Why has the Arab world been unable to get its act together to make it more costly for the United States to pursue this unbalanced policy?
Why? Why, Michael?
Well, let me ask the second question, which is, why haven't the Europeans been more active and independent rather than being, as I think one of your leaders was called, a poodle? That is to say...
All of them are called that, Michael.
Let's try to answer them. Why the Arabs, Munir, haven't been putting pressure on America? Isn't it in their best interest today to put enough pressure on the new American administration in order to save face in their Arab capitals?
They don't have the will, as a matter of fact. And they have many paralyzing aspects among themselves and among their people, and they are so weak. And I think they are in an unbalanced situation, especially who are called the moderates of the Arabs.
And why aren't the Europeans doing something, Alain?
I think there is a shift in the European policy toward the United States. I'm speaking especially about France. For political, ideological reasons, and I think the idea that we are a part of the Western world, that there is this Islamic threat, that there is a terrorism threat. It depends also internally, but on Iran, France had the same and even more extreme position than the United States. On the Palestinian question, unfortunately, we have now the same position as the United States. Sarkozy especially is thinking he is part of the Western world and our relation with United States should be better. We must come back to NATO, etc. Okay. And this is important, even if we have different interests than the United States, and on different subjects we can have differences.
Well, you certainly have agreements on the question of Sudan. It seems there is almost a consensus in the West to punish the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. But there's a sense in the Arab world that while the likes of Saddam Hussein and Omar al-Bashir are being accused and we want to be put on trial as criminals, others, whether they're Western leaders or Israeli leaders or whatever, they are not.
Marwan, I can give you a personal account of this. I was telephoned in Beirut some years ago by the Tribunal into War Crimes in ex-Yugoslavia, and they insisted that I must give evidence against a Serb prison camp commander, and I said no, and they said, we have ways of making you come. I said no, when you put Ariel Sharon for Sabra and Shatila, who was held personally responsible, in the words of the Kahan Commission the year afterwards in Israel, then I'll consent. But it's not you who's going to choose our war criminals.
Very respectable stand, very respectable.
Yeah. Is humanitarian intervention the new pretext for superpowers to interfere in the Arab world?
Well, look, I think the way the Sudan thing is regarded in the United States, it is strictly a humanitarian thing. I think people don't have much of an understanding of the politics of it. They see a regime using brutal, very brutal means against a defenseless population, and shouldn't something be done about it? This is a movement that I think is not driven by strategy so much as by civil society groups, human rights organizations.
No, but it's Susan Rice in the United Nations now calling for the true United Security Council to step in and to support the court in order to get al-Bashir.
She works since many years for that. You know, the game is this. The West and the foreign forces try to encourage the differences inside Sudan. They encourage what happened to take place, reaching a civil war. When you have a civil war, then you have all kinds of crimes against humanity from both sides. In any place, in any case in the world, when you have civil war, you have this.
But regardless of the crimes or genocide or any of these accusations, the question that China is stepping in to defend Sudan in one form or another adds yet another global force to the other three we mentioned before. It seems like the Arab world is becoming a real competition battlefield for so many. And is China now coming in? Is it the new surging force?
Yes, it is. It's playing an important role in Africa, especially with, economic relation and political relation, etc. But it's not only China. I think on the question of the tribunal, as you said, even all the Arabs, I don't see any Arab regime who can support this decision concerning Bashir. There is a refusal of this kind of humanitarian intervention because we know, we intervened in Iraq to save the people. This was a pretext. And we killed, I don't know, more people than were killed in Darfur. Right. And nobody's asking question about it.
But now with the global recession, of course, bringing the likes of China to be more powerful around the world, do you think the Arabs have an opportunity here, especially with them being so energy rich, to affect decision-making in the West or in the North regarding the Arab world?
Well, it may be a kind of a blessing in disguise that this economic recession, particularly if it lasts a long time, will have the effect of curbing and clipping the wings to some extent of the United States.
Or making it more aggressive, maybe, Michael?
Well, I don't think so, because it's too expensive to be so aggressive. We're already, we haven't talked enough about what the Americans think is the real security problem, which is Afghanistan, Pakistan. But if the global economic recession continues to hurt, and it's hurting a lot in America, surely this constrains imperial ambitions to some extent. And maybe that's not so bad, and it gives an opportunity certainly for other powers who may not be military powers but are certainly rising economic powers, China, India, Brazil, to come in and make this region much more a competitive area rather than an area dominated by the United States.
Well, this is a very positive note. It's good to end on that, but I need to do something completely untraditional on this show. Because I want to hear, do you have any particular suggestion, one suggestion do you think the Arab League Summit need to come up with in the end of the month?
To decide that the Arab League must cease to exist because it is a totally unnecessary, useless tool with very boring people in it.
Not I think exactly it's a positive note, Robert. Michael?
Ideally, if this were a regional organization that had independence and if there were any kind of consensus among these leaders, then they would be talking about curbing economic and all kinds of connections with the United States, showing all kinds of ways in which we are really unhappy with you, but they have to be able to show that in a credible way.
Alain, there is the Arab Initiative. The summit says that it is on the table for 3 months. if on 3 months it's not implemented, there will be sanctions taken by the Arabs concerning the policy of the United States.
That sounds like a reasonable position.
Generally, if I heard what Mr. Robert said in the past, I'll get so angry to talk about finishing with the Arab League. But if they did not change now, and their last chance is in the summit meeting in Doha, I think Amr Moussa will get rid with the Arab League and dismantle it.
Well, my feeling is that probably it's going to stay with us for a long time to come. But we're going to have to end with that, gentlemen, and I'll be back in a moment. For Arab leaders, there is time to talk and time to listen. At their upcoming summit, they must talk honestly about how to improve their poor standing in the world and deal collectively with the dramatic regional and global challenges engulfing their countries. The following day, the 22 Arab leaders should take time to listen to their South American counterparts at their second interregional summit to advance South-South cooperation. They might come from the opposite side of the world, but they share the same grievances against Western hegemony. The Arab and Muslim landscape might be the West's most recent battlefield, but the South American continent has also had its share of horrific colonialism and Western military interventions. Despite widespread drug trafficking, gang wars, and huge gaps between rich and poor, good governance, economic growth, and strong and active social movements are on the rise among Latin Americans. They have come a long way in terms of fiscal, judicial, and political reforms, as well as economic growth and regional cooperation. And they can testify how by getting their act together, the Arabs can act. Inshallah, that is. See you next time.